Welcome back, my friends. It's week 2. So I'm not going to do a lot of voiceover work on this today because we went over a lot in class, but I am going to take moments to kind of pop in and remind you of some of our techniques. So right here where I'm doing the leaves, this is our press, drag, and lift. Okay, press, drag, and lift. And it's really a great practice to do these leaves because the ratio of pressure to water to paint is different. You can create all sorts of, so I put a little more water on my brush and I just left whatever paint I had on it. And I created this leaf and it's just so pretty. So practice I press, drag, and lift with different amounts of water and paint on your brush. Okay. And also practice with different brushes. Any round brush will do for this technique. As you can see, I'm about to use my little number 6 utility brush that I love so much. Look at that. And I like put a lot of pressure on it and just drug it as far as I could. Okay, and it made a really long, dark, pretty leaf. There we go. And again, it's a little short. A little bit shorter leaf because I didn't put as much pressure on it. Okay, so I'm going to go off camera. And once again, here you go. Here is that Big Daddy brush that I used in class. This is so fun, especially when you're doing big pieces. But I just wanted to use it to show you that you could do this shape with any round brush that you have. Okay, look at that. Gosh. Oh, and also, it is required to make sound effects when you paint. Sorry. My family thinks I'm nuts sometimes. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just dropping little bits of petals and paint and stuff on the paper. I'll just be like, bloop, bloop, bloop. And they're like, you are nuts. I am, but that's okay. They're stuck with me. So there you go. So try your teardrops with whatever shape or whatever size round brush you have. It is important to do this with a round brush. Okay, so after taking my brush off camera and cleaning it up a little bit and putting some more paint on it, I'm back to that utility number 6 round brush that I love so much. And I'm press, drag, lifting, and I'm doing it kind of now in a circle. Excuse me. So now it's kind of like a eucalyptus leaf, like a little silver dollar eucalyptus leaf. And again, just the amount of water or the amount of paint or the amount of pressure can really create lots of beautiful different looks. And in this one, I typically like to start up top. Wherever I started from is where that stem comes from. So if you want one that kind of hangs off to the side, paint it sideways like I just did. And I just go in and I fill it in. And then you're going to see me as I continue to paint these with this number 6 brush, but also I'm going to bring in that Big Daddy brush again. It's just really super easy. And I loaded this up with a little more water and just used whatever paint I had on my brush. So again, you're going to see lots of different colors and textures happening here. Okay, so now we're getting to one of my favorite kinds of leaves. They're these beautiful, long, kind of undulating leaves that you find like on carnations or ivy. First of all, ivy's like my favorite plant on the planet. I love it. I love it so much. So here's one of those beautiful, or like a lily leaf. You know, that kind of looks like a leaf on a lily plant. Just those beautiful they have that fold in the center and they get really long and swoopy. So what I'm doing is that press, drag, and lift, but I'm doing it and I'm just kind of just going with it, with the shape of it. Just try some things. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, like that little corkscrew thing I did there. Not really perfect at all. And I even go back in and try and fix it later. So what you're going to see with this is just, again, press, drag, lift, and do interesting things with your hands while you do it. You'll see this later as I work on another flower, but you're going to kind of see it now. I will press, drag, lift, and sometimes I'll turn the brush in my fingers. I won't use so much of my hand to make something. I'll use my fingers to turn the brush, and it creates this really cool drag that looks like, I don't know, it just creates more variation in the shades inside the leaf, okay? So again, super duper easy way of making something look really interesting. Just turn your fingers, or turn the brush in your fingers while you're painting. Okay, now this is fun. So I have switched over to my number 1 brush, and I'm going to pick up it's a pretty, not super thick amount of paint, but I want it to be darker than the leaf itself. So I might go in with that same color that I used in the leaf and just get a good amount of it, or, you know, pick up maybe a darker brown or gray or black. So I'm going to go in, and because this leaf is still a little damp around the edges, once this dries, it's going to have a more muted detail on it than, you know, like a completely like opaque line that cuts through the center of the leaf or on the edges. And, you know, you can go back in with a little water and scrub it a little bit, and that'll soften it too. But again, this is my number 1 brush, and I love it for details. Love it, love it, love it. So, and you can use it to do all sorts of things. So I'm making a pretty thick, dark line on this bigger leaf because I want it to look a little more whimsical. It doesn't have to look necessarily realistic. Again, watercolor is supposed to be kind of just the impression of how you see a flower. These loose florals, that's how it works. Make it what you want it to be. So after I've done that leaf, I want to come in to these teensy little flower leaves down here. They're really pretty, long, skinny ones. And it is so fun to add like little spindly lines that go around it like an ivy. You know how they have these beautiful little tiny things that wrap around other leaves, other parts of the stem. It's just my favorite. I just love it. It's so fun because it just looks so elegant. Okay, and so again, you're taking your detail brush, and you're working with, there you go, see, do you see how I did that? That was something I wanted to point out, was right here is totally fine. I just used my wrist or whatever, but that longer part, you can go back and watch it again. I used more of my fingers and it rolled it a little bit to make that little swoop-dee swoop. All right, and again, like, not super huge fan of this coil that I made earlier, so I'm going back in and making it pretty, and it worked. It was great. So again, this is the great part of detail brushes, and this one in particular, I wanted to make that fold in the center a little more visible, but I also wasn't thrilled with the thinness of it, so I wanted to make it a little thicker. And so now it looks like maybe almost like a pothos leaf or something. It's got that, it would have that beautiful white edge on it. So yeah, detailed brushes are lifesavers. So here we're about to label everything that we've just done. And the reason, I know for me, it helps me to remember what things are called, how I did something, if I can label it. So we're just kind of creating our own little charts here, our own little cheat sheets, if you will. So just make sure to go in and label your teardrops, your big round leaves, like your eucalyptus leaves, and then your long leaves, so like the long spindly leaves. Okay, just make sure those are labeled. And now, oh yes, and don't forget your details. Okay, you need to have an example of your details brush. Okay, and what it can do. All right, so now we're just gonna move on. So go ahead and tear that page out of your book if you're like me and use the whole stinking page. I don't do things small, probably because I'm blind as a bat. So what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to move on to our petals. So go ahead and label that at the top, petals. And then you're going to see one of the first things that we're going to tackle is, again, that teardrop shape. So if you need to now, or you can come back later and label that teardrop petals. So, and I've got my, I'm switching back to my utility brush. So that number 6 round brush, and picking up just a really lovely shade of blue. And then here we go again, teardrop, press, drag, lift. Okay. And again, this is great practice when you're working with just trying to figure out how paint and water and pressure work well together. Okay. So just do that for me. Do like 4, 5, 6 leaves all around, and just kind of create your own flower. All right, and just like the leaves, I'm going to bring in the Big Daddy brush. And again, just to show you, you can use a round brush for this shape, any size round brush. And especially if you're working like on a bigger piece, you're going to, honestly, you'll want a bigger brush. But again, these are those Princeton brushes I was telling you about. So anytime you see those red brushes, me working with a red brush, it's a Princeton brush. They are a little pricey. I love them. They're worth every penny. But honestly, the ones that we got for this course that were on the Amazon list, I love. And the only reason I'm not using them right now is I kind of misplaced them. So I gotta go find them. But I wanted to make sure that I got this video done for you guys in time. So I made sure to just grab my Princeton's because that's what I had on hand. But your brushes are fabulous, and they're going to do the exact same thing that this is doing. So, and as you can see, I'm going back in with another little brush, and I can't tell you which one that is. But it looks like it's the same size as my Princeton Utility 6, or maybe the number 4. There we go. And I'm just borrowing paint from other parts of the picture because I was like, well, this looks a little too muddy. It needed some detail. And so that's what I did. Again, just try some new things. And I'm adding this. I love this blue. I call this Moody Blue. And it's like a midnight blue, but it's got a little gray in it and a tinge of aqua. It is the most delightful. It's like a vintage blue, and it's so lovely. All right, so we've used our utility brush and our Big Daddy brush to make some teardrop shaped petals. Okay, now we're gonna move on to our C shapes. So this was my least favorite flower, figuring out how to do when I started out, because it is a pain in the tuchus. It's like, golly. The secret with these, though, kind of like when we did the in class, the secret is really just having enough water on the page. Like, so if you're starting with a dry page, make sure that your paint's pretty wet. You don't want necessarily dry paint because it is so pigment rich that it's going to soak right into that paper and stain, and it'll be really hard to move around. So make sure that your C shapes are pretty wet. And then once you get all of your C shapes made, when you go back in with your clean water brush, your brush that has some water on it, it'll move around really, really easily. Easily. Let me say that again. All right, so usually I only make like 5 or 6 C's, but in this one, because it was bigger and I wanted to show like an example of what we would need to do, I made it a little larger. But usually I would just make like 6 plus the little center dot. All right, and there I go with my clean water, and that's it. And it's moving around really easily because it is still very wet paint. Okay, and I'm not saying flood it, you know, like our technique. But you definitely want to be able to scrub it. So that means it's got to be pretty wet. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue around, probably with just the water and the paint that I have on my brush after I've worked it around a little bit and connected some petals and connected some layers. Okay, so yep, there I go. And I'm just creating some softer petals around the side with the extra paint and water that I have on my brush. All right, so now I'm gonna try this with my larger, and I think it's a size 16. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it's size 16. A size 16 brush, and I want to challenge you to, when you're doing these C-shaped flowers, try a bigger brush, try a smaller brush. You know, it's a lot easier when it's a round brush, but try all different size round brushes and see which one works for you. Now, again, like the big flower above it, if you're doing a bigger piece, I would suggest using a big old brush. And so that's what I'm using here. It's just a really big old honking brush. But exactly the same technique, just with a larger brush. Now, like I said, challenge yourself. Try something different. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Also, as you watch me kind of scrub the edges of this, okay, and what's cool, I want you to notice this. I'm using a lot of water. There's a lot more water on this brush than I had on the last flower. And look at just the texture that is bringing out, and it's crazy down, and I love it. It's so just lush. I just love it. Just makes it really lush. And hey, connect petals, make new petals. Go back in if you like. I love like a really centralized dark center, because I feel like the darker the middle, the more the focal point it has. But also that's like what roses and peonies and things like that do. They're just really dark in the middle first, and then it spreads out from there. So it's realism, with a little zhuzh. It's my impression of a flower. I mean a rose rather. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our groupings, which these are so fun. I love these. These are some of my favorites because honestly, once you nail this, it's so easy to do. And it's just one of those flowers you can just not even think about doing and do it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. And I'm gonna clean this up. And I'm pretty sure this is my one. It's either that or it's my little cat's tongue brush that, and that's a different shape altogether, but it's like a little flat dagger brush. But this is, and yeah, that's what it is. It's my little flat dagger brush. And let me tell you something. These brushes are awesome. I love the ones that we got. And then I discovered these like a week, probably 2 weeks after I had put the list out there for this course. I'm going to link these brushes in the description because they are so much fun to paint with, especially if you've got, you know, kind of a typical set of brushes with the round, and then there's a wash brush and there's a detail brush or whatever. These are awesome because they fit everything in between. They have lots of really cool edges. Most of them actually come to a nice point, so you can use them for details, but I'm going to link them in the description. So what's important with this grouping right here is that I'm building from the bottom up. So you see I started with a light orange. It was there's a few darker pieces, but on the bottom layer, I'm using like a light color, something that I want to be able to layer on top of because I want some really vibrant colors with this. So as you watch me build these little groupings, and they're like little, just little like paint strokes that are connected at the tip. There's like 2 or 3, and then I move over and do like maybe 1 or 1 and 2 little strokes together, and nothing's like super centralized. It's just kind of all over the place. This is a fun little grouping to do, especially if you have, if you're doing like a bouquet, a loose floral bouquet, and you're painting. It's a really nice contrast between your really soft, fluid-looking roses and peonies. Is a nice little burst of like, almost like ragged sharp detail. It's really cool. So the other thing about groupings is you can go back in because it's a very defined shape. And again, once again, you want this paint to be pretty wet when you're doing these because you're going to go back in with water and just kind of soften a few of the rough edges, not all of them, because you want it to be a different texture than the other flowers. But yeah, just go in if there's something sticking out and you're like, I don't love that. Just soften it up. Okay. Okay, and here is one of my favorites, and I loved doing this one in class. So here's the lavender. So what you're gonna want to do is get a good, like again, you want this to be pretty wet. So these are like droplets of water and paint. It's not like again, we're using dry paper. So you want the paper and the water to be We're not flooding it, but again, you want like droplets. Because what's going to happen is once we figure out what shape we want, or how long or how big we want this to be, we're going to go back in with clean water and just start connecting the dots. It's pretty simple. And I know it doesn't seem simple at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's going to be one of your favorite flowers to do because it automatically adds like, I don't know, a certain amount of elegance to the page. Just, I feel like lavender is one of the most elegant flowers in watercolors. And pardon the train going by in the background. If you hear something like a rumbling or a strange sound, that's what we live not too far from the train tracks. So here we go. And once again, I start adding water, just adding water. And what's cool is once they start connecting and start mingling and getting happy, I'm going to have like extra water and paint on my brush. And so what you can do then is you can see at the top where I had added a couple little light pieces up there to make it a little bit longer and to change the shape. But you can add those on the outside, on the side, just those fun little accent pieces. And, you know, with lavender, the shape that you want to make is kind of like an elongated diamond shape, but with like the rounder edges on the sides. It's narrow and long and pretty and narrow at the top, and then comes down, and instead of like, you know how trees kind of, they stop and then there's the trunk of the tree. This is more of a stalk situation. So it comes down and it narrows, the bottom narrows the further down the end of the stalk that it goes. So now I'm just going to come back in and create my little stalk, my little green stalk. And what's cool about these kind of flowers too, because they're loose, you don't have to wait for it to completely dry. It can still be a little bit damp, because when you do that and you add that green in there with that purple, because they're complementary colors and they're so, oh my gosh, they look so pretty together when they kind of bleed into each other. So just go all the way through up wherever there's some like white space, you know, through the middle, just get a little peak of green in there. And you can also, you know, do a little bit of like tiny little stalks that connect maybe some of the little lavender buds. So another really great filler flower that adds a lot of texture, a lot of movement to a piece. It's kind of like an aster or a little daisy, but I call them the scribbles. And so we just scribble, 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 just making little, you know, lines basically. And I changed up the color a couple of times. I started with the dark blue, and then I went to more of a royal blue, and then I threw some magenta in there. And so I could make a really pretty purple. And you kind of just want to leave that center white and empty, because now you're going to go in with water and you're just going to mess up what you just did. You're going to soften it. You're going to pull out the paint and create petals. And you're just going to keep doing it. And again, leave that center a little more empty, so when you do start to get closer in, it's a lighter color. Ooh, look at that magenta. Oh, it's so pretty. And I love when it mixed with that blue. Look at that purple. Because you're going to add in a darker color at the end. But look, we're just making little leaves. And I don't know, just making it look happy. And you don't have to always get rid of every little scribble mark. I just did in this one because I wanted a fatter flower for some reason. But try it yourself as you're practicing along. Just keep adding a little bit of water here, a little bit of water there, and pulling things apart. Okay, and one of my favorite parts of this flower, like I said a little earlier, is the dark center. It's that moody blue again. I keep using that moody blue. But what you do is you take, that dark, and you kind of pull that out too. You create details, lines, edges of petals, things like that. It just gives it a really pretty multi-dimensional look. And again, when you pair that up with this really elegant rose or peony or stalks of lavender, it just creates wonderful balance. So everything doesn't look, kind of run together. It doesn't look too flat. And now, here comes my favorite part, a new page. So now we have, now that we've worked on our petals and our techniques, we're going to move on to example flowers. So I want to take you back though to the page that we just removed and take a look at this, this grouping right here. Okay, that's a carnation. That's what we're going to use for our carnation today. Again, and I like to start off with this flower because it kind of suspends expectation. So I know we all want to create these gorgeous, beautiful loose florals, and they're dreamy, and we can use them for anything, or art, or stationery, whatever. But let me tell you something. A carnation, even though it's a little rougher on the edges, has some serious staying power, and it creates the most wonderful, like I said, kind of like an antithesis to everything that you think should be, fluffy and loose and, kind of like what everybody expects. That's kind of why I like carnations, because they're not what you expect. Some people think they might be humdrum or run-of-the-mill, but let me tell you, they come in some pretty fabulous colors. And I like them. They last forever too. If you've ever noticed, they're always the last flowers to die in an arrangement. So let's hear it for our strong little, our little carnations. They've got some gumption. So again, in watercolors, traditionally we build light to dark. So what I'm doing here again, like I showed you in the grouping, is I'm building my light layer first with that lighter orange tangerine color, adding a little water here and there to lighten it. So that's what you're going to do. I want you to, whatever colors you're choosing, build with your light first. Here comes the red. Oh gosh, those colors together just make me so happy. Especially in the wintertime. I think that's what it is. Right now I am grieving the loss of the sun a little bit, even though I prefer cold weather. I like cold, sunny weather. And lately it's been kind of gray and yucky. So I think these colors are just bringing a little sunshine into my day. So here we are, we're building again, light to dark. So, and you can see, I'm just kind of putting this red wherever. It doesn't have to be, there's no like super central focal point. And again, with carnations, you don't really have a focal point. It's just there's ruffles and ruffles and ruffles. So, do what you want. Put it where you think it should go. It's like, wouldn't it look interesting if we had a big old dark red leaf right up here? So try that, and then see where it gets you. And finally, we're coming in with this beautiful like magenta purple mixture. Can't tell you exactly what I used, but I know I wanted some more red purple going on. So I'm just coming in with a little detail here and there. Not a huge amount of purple, but just enough for, you know, to make it interesting. Again, do whatever colors you want, but this is kind of my third layer, my final layer, so it's the darkest color that I'm going to use. And, you know, I'm not necessarily doing all groupings at this point either. I'm just doing a little slash of color here, maybe one or two little stripes here, and then you'll see in just a second how I'm going to blend these out. And again, not a ton of blending to be happening, but softening bits here and there. And now for the softening. So I've taken my brush off screen and I've basically just cleaned it off and put a bunch of water on it. As you can see, I'm just kind of hitting certain spots. Like if I think there's too much white going on, I'm gonna run in there with just a little bit of water and soften the edges of the paint surrounding the white area. And I wanted this one, the edge on this to stretch a little further, so I'm just stretching it with a little extra water. That scrubbing technique that we've been working on. So again, there's, you know, not a lot of rules when it comes to carnations. It's just kind of make it look as spiky or as non-spiky as you want. So as you can see, I'm just softening a little bit, and that's it. So now what I'm going to do, after I've softened it for a bit, I'm going to move on to the bulb. But for the next few seconds, I think I'm just going to soften it some more. So I softened it a little bit, and then you saw me add a teeny bit more detail where I wanted a little more if it was too soft. And now we're moving on to the little bulb of the carnation. And so as you watched me do that little oblong oval shape, it was just that press, drag, lift, press, drag, lift. It's that same technique that we've been using. And I went in and did a couple of different colors of green on my brush. Not necessarily mixing it, just picking up a little color here and there. Okay, and again, just creating, like I said, a little oblong oval and a cool little stem. So this is my favorite part of doing a carnation. I love the little, like, as spiky as the flower is, look at these leaves. Watch this. And did you see what I just did? I rolled. I said this earlier, I'm rolling the brush in my fingers as I'm painting. So I'm press, drag, lifting, but I'm also between my two fingers where most of the pressure is with the brush. I'm rolling the brush. So it's a lot easier to do than to use your entire wrist and hand to paint. Actually, you use your fingertips a lot more when you're doing watercolor. And we can go over that next week in class. Definitely something we want to do. Again, it's a little more, it's a technique rather than a rule, but a fun one. And we'll practice that again because I think it might have been a little confusing for everybody. So again, here is another type of flower that we've already done. It's the aster. So aster or daisy or whatever, it's just these fun little spiky flowers. And so we've scribbled, and a nice dark, really dark, pungent, like purple. And I'm doing a little more of a monochromatic flower this time. The other one that I did had some magenta, some purple, some blue. This is mainly purple. It does have a little bit of darker blue in it. But again, now I'm taking water through those scribbles and just doing the thing. And so I'm making more petals. And you'll see on this one, I actually add these little, I don't know, they kind of look like little feathery strips of purple that come out from the center. But you'll see what I mean. But yeah, make it your own. Again, this is your impression of what a flower should look like. Here comes that moody blue again. Oh, gosh, I love this color so much. So I'm just kind of creating, a center. And I cannot for the life of me remember what those are called in the middle of the flower. But, the middle of the flower. Using that moody blue and dragging it out, creating a center. Using it with my little detail brush. So that's a number 1 brush. And I used that on the carnation in the last flower to create the stems and the leaves and all that. So just a fun little detail brush that can do a lot. It actually is very, very useful. Okay, so I'm done with the moody blue and I've made some more petals and details. So now I'm going off camera and I'm kind of just cleaning it up, because what I want to do now is work on the stem and the leaves of this flower in particular. And it's one of those stems that's kind of got the little fuzzies on it and looks a little ragged, which is really fun to paint. So I'm just, again, picking up whatever color green I want to pick up. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a particular color. And oh, look at that press, drag, lift. It created so much variation in color. Love it. And this paint's still pretty wet. So I've got a good amount of dampness on my brush, and I'm just pulling that paint out from that stem. I'm not adding any more paint to make those leaves. It's just what's there, which is really cool. So again, sometimes you might just need to use more water than you think you do. I know, and it's one of those things. You just keep practicing to figure that stuff out. Because if you don't get it at first, guess what? Nobody else did either. Nobody else that started in watercolors made anything that looked professional in their first week. Like it is hard, y'all. So please do not beat yourselves up about that kind of stuff. And here I'm going back in with some more moody blue just to give that final little pop of dimension in the middle of that gorgeous little flower. Okay, I know I say this a lot, but this is definitely one of my favorite flowers ever. It just adds so much punch to anything you put it in, and it's the delphinium. And it's kind of like how you do a lavender. It's just a bunch of smaller things that create this kind of elongated, graceful, rounded diamond shape. So it's long and skinny at the top, and then it gets a little fatter towards the bottom, and then it comes back down to a little bit of a point. And what I love about this flower in particular, though, is that it's so rich. Like, I've never seen a delphinium that wasn't like, holy cow, how did it come out that color? And I have for years been able to, I'm lucky enough to be able to work with florists. Did that professionally for a long time. Actually, I did work for a production company, but I was actually always in charge of the flowers. You know, boo-hoo, poor me. I got to go to all the wholesale flower places. And so I just love how round and juicy these little pops of color are. These little blooms are just, look, they're just little circles. Look at this. Just round little things. No particular shape in, other than they're round and they're little fat little blooms, and I love them. And this this flower comes in even though it's like a purple delphinium, there are so many shades of purple and blue on the stalk. It's so beautiful. They actually used this when I got married in 2021 for my, what do you call it? Not bachelorette. Oh my goodness, my wedding shower. Bridal shower. There you go. That's what there's the name. So they used it for my bridal shower, and I got married in November, so my bridal shower was end of September or beginning of October. I can't remember exactly when it was. But the centerpieces were these stunning, those autumn colors that are jewel tones, these really rich, deep oranges and reds and greens and yellows, and that pop of purpley blue in there, just, my heart exploded. It was so fun. I love all the pictures. I'll have to show you sometime. But here we go see, I'm just making round, and I'm picking up different colors as I go. So you can see, as of right now, I've got at least 2 or 3 different shades of purple, right? And that's, I'm using, I think it's $139 in the palette that we bought on Amazon, if you bought that palette. And then that magenta that's in there too, I mixed in a little bit of that. And then you're going to see me in just a second, go off camera, rinse off. I'm going to pop some blue in there. There it is. There's that royal blue. Oh my gosh. And when it mingles in with that purple, it is the stuff the dreams are made of. I just love it. And again, super easy with the shape. It's just, a little longer and skinnier at the top. Gets a little fatter as it goes down, and then again, kind of thins out at the bottom as it's going down the stalk. So this flower, like the lavender, you're going to create a stalk that just goes up the middle, right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Not a big deal, because you have a lot of white space in there. And I think that's what makes this look so much fun and so much fun to paint, is because there's a lot of negative space there. And you kind of go, well, this looks kind of neat. I don't really even need to fill that in. No, you don't. Leave that negative space there. Just give yourself the freedom to leave it. Okay, so there's more of that blue, but we lightened it up. Oh my gosh, with some water and a little bit of purple. And here's some dark colors. Again, we just want to give it a little something, a little zhuzh. Okay, here we go. Right. Don't you just want to hold that? Oh my gosh, I just want to pick it up off the page and hold it in my hands. It's just the most, and they're so velvety and soft. Can you tell I'm a really tactile person? I love the way that things feel. Okay, so just finishing up the bottom here. We don't want it to be too light at the bottom. So that's a really good shape. And what we're going to do next is we're going to clean up our brush and really start thinking about the color greens that we're going to use. So with this one, I actually went in and did a couple of different shades of green. I did the dark green that you see with the chrysanthemum, but I also, chrysanthemum, is that right? Carnation. Goodness gracious. The carnation. And put a little brighter green in it. And so what that did was really, because the other colors are so bright, if you did anything dark, it would just disappear. And again, because it's also a little bit brighter green, if it kind of bleeds into that purple, it's going to be so pretty and complementary. You'll be able to see the green and the purple. So there we go. We're just making a stalk that runs down the middle, and then just these little tiny stalks that kind of connect with some of the flowers that are coming out from the middle piece. And voila, we have our delphinium. Now, we're going to move on to another flower, very similar to our delphinium, but just smaller. It's our lavender. We did this in class, and I think it was a little frustrating for everybody at first. And sorry guys, that was kind of my fault. I didn't mention this, but just to, and I did mention it during class finally, because I was like, oh, that's why everybody's struggling, because I didn't tell them how much water to put on their page. So when you're making the lavender, make sure that you're using like droplets of water and paint, okay? Because as you move, this kind of paper, because it is so thick and porous, sucks up water very quickly. So you want to get the shape that you want, but you also then want to go in with a clean water brush. So I'm going off to do that right now. I got my clean water brush, and I'm just going to start connecting my little almond shapes, okay? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I know I say that, and you're like, this is not easy. No, it's not. Not for the first few times that you do it, but I promise you, once you do figure out how to make a lavender stalk that you love, girl, it is just the easiest thing to do. And I don't know what it is. I just think lavender stalks are some of the most elegant, I don't know. I use that word a lot, but it's just like you add a lavender stalk to a piece and it just elevates it. It's just beautiful. So like we did with the delphinium, we're just using our water to, mush together a little bit. Much more so with the lavender. And look, so I have extra water on my brush with extra paint in it, so I can make it a little longer at the bottom. I can add little pieces here and there for my lavender. And now I'm just going to go straight up like I did with the stalk that we practiced with earlier in the groupings. When we were doing the groupings portion of the techniques. Now we're just going to take a stalk and run right up the middle of those groupings. And again, because this isn't completely dry, it's going to bleed a little bit, but honestly, I love when it does that because it doesn't look like super realistic. It looks like lavender fields look in my dreams. Like if I'm walking through lavender fields in France with my husband in my dreams, that's what they would look like. Just impressionistic, just fun. Again, your impression of what a lavender stalk should look like. And also, lavender stalks are not, I've said this before, they're not actually purple, they're actually almost completely blue. So, but we don't talk about that. Again, this is our impression or our rendition of what a flower should look like. So, make it whatever color you want. I actually like to add sometimes a little pink in there, just to zhuzh it up a little bit, just to make it a little different. But you do you. Do whatever you like. gosh, those lavender stalks turned out yummy. I love those. Okay, so let's practice this one again because, like I said, this is probably one of the more difficult flowers we'll do just because everybody does it different. It honestly, it's kind of like handwriting. Everybody's looks different, right? Not everybody has the exact same handwritings, and not everybody's going to have the exact same watercolor loose floral rose. It's just practice makes perfect. I mean, I hate to even say perfect. I like to say practice makes permanent. So if you do this enough, you'll remember the way to do it enough to where, like, even if, so I took a break from doing paint for a few months just because of life stuff that was happening. One of the first things I came back to doing was loose florals, and I tried a rose for the first time. And honestly, I was afraid I would be really frustrated with the process because I hadn't done it in quite a while. And I was like, and I just went back to my training, and I was like, oh, I just need to make a few C's here and press, drag, and lift, like I am doing now, and keep it nice and loose, nice and wet, and then just add water. And so it turned out really nice, and it was nice. And it was only that way though because I had put in hours of practice. So it made the process to making that rose permanent in my brain. So I don't like the saying practice makes perfect. I like the saying practice makes permanent. Okay, and again, here we go. So that paint is nice and juicy. And so we're gonna take more water, and because that paint is so wet, super easy to blend. So just as you're making your rose, remember, don't be afraid to use water. Okay, so as we have been blending and making this look just rich and lush and dreamy like it should, don't be afraid to go back in with a little extra paint or just move it around to where the center's a little bit darker because, you know, again, we're talking about creating those focal points. So this has been a blast. You guys are amazing, and I cannot wait to see what your practice has produced next week. See you guys soon.